Welcome to the conversation at SC. We are very fortunate today to have Navin Gupta, country head of Ripple in India, to share with us his experience, and we were happy to have him here to have this discussion. Navin, firstly, welcome to Malaysia.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think tell us a bit more about what is Ripple, what problem does it solve, and how does that disrupt and change our industry, especially in the payment space and more.
First of all, Vyman, thank you very much. A pleasure to be here, and always a pleasure to be in Malaysia, and particularly in the background of SC and talking to you.
Okay.
Ripple was born with a single use case in mind to essentially remove the friction from cross-border payments, right? So we want to make international cross-border payment as simple as sending an email. So Navin sending an email to Vyman, exactly the same way I should be able to send money to you, or I should be able to receive money from you, right? In terms of just the size itself, there are $155 trillion that gets sent between two entities cross-border. So it's a large flow that happens between two countries or individuals living in two countries. And if you look at today, for example, the World Bank report in December 2017, for retail remittances, on an average, it costs about 7.09%. I think that's too much friction in terms of speed, time, money, and the intermediary fee that is being charged, and Ripple is there to change this.
Perhaps if you could share with us, what specific problem do you solve? Why is it the old way or the traditional way or conventional way doesn't work?
True.
And where does Ripple comes in that gives solve that particular problem in terms of cross-border payment, I guess?
Absolutely. So let's look at the user experience, right? So Vyman, your experience, let's assume you're trying to send money out to your children in another country. So what you would need to do is you would need to go to a bank branch, and what you would be using is an antiquated system called a SWIFT, which essentially will be the plumbing behind for the international wire transfer to take place. So you would go to the bank branch, and what you would be told is to fill up a transfer form, or sometimes it could be online as well. Yeah. You would be told a fee that you would be charged. Possibly you would not know what exchange rate will be applied to that transaction. You will only come to know after the fact. What you would also not know is what will be the receiving bank fee, right? What you will be given is three choices. Choose R, which means all the charges will come to you. Choose SHA, which is share the charges, or you choose BEN, which is the beneficiary will absorb all the charges. But what these charges mean, you will not know, right? You would put in, say, for example, you're sending money, you will put the name, you will put the account number. But if the account number is wrong, you would not know. You will only know once your account is debited, and maybe 2 days later, once the transaction is rejected, you would get a call to essentially say, Wyman, this transaction didn't turn out to be correct. And then you would not be guaranteed to say when the money would reach the beneficiary. In some cases, it is 4 hours, in some cases, it's 4 days, right? Because as you know, money goes through a series of banks before it reaches the final beneficiary. Now, fast forward, let's assume this bank was a Ripple-enabled bank, and Vyman was a customer of a Ripple-enabled bank here in Malaysia. What you will be able to see is you will be able to see the sending bank fee, you will be able to see the FX rate, you will be able to see the receiving bank fee, and you will be able to see the net total in the foreign currency, let's assume it's GBP or it's Indian rupees, of what the beneficiary would receive. Once you are convinced that this is the right transaction for you, you can say, yeah, go ahead, submit with the transaction, and within almost real time, in about 10 seconds, your account will be debited and the beneficiary's account will be credited, and you will get a confirmation back to say that the beneficiary account has been credited with the exact amount in the local currency which you were promised when you activated the transaction. Ripple is already live in a number of markets. So for example, Japan to Thailand, we're able to do it. Siam Bank is our partner in Thailand. You can work with SBI Remit in Japan and send the money. Similarly, for example, for India, we are live between Middle East and India. So if you're a Rack Bank customer in the UAE, then you're able to send money into to an Axis Bank customer exactly by the same mode. Similarly, we are also live with Standard Chartered and Axis Bank. So if you're a Standard Chartered customer in Singapore, you are live with Axis Bank in India. So, and we are, of course, lighting up lots of other corridors around the world, but I picked up some specific examples in Asia itself.
Okay, so I understand that Ripple Labs is, regulated or registered in the state of New York. could you share with us, what's the regulatory regime? How is it regulated? How are you guys are able to provide these services, whether in the US or outside the US?
Yeah. So let me just first clarify. So currently what we are live with SBI Remit and Siam Bank or RAC Bank and Axis Bank is fiat currencies, right?
Okay.
So we are able to do US dollar, INR, whatever the currency of the choice, but these are regulated currencies, and of course we are able to remove all the inefficiencies in the fiat currency transmission using our blockchain platform.
Okay.
So in this case, there is no use of a digital asset or a crypto asset, as some other people may understand it, right? The other part of the solution that Ripple has is we have something called as XRP, which is independent of Ripple. So Ripple owns XRP as a utility token or a digital asset. But at the same time, for example, if Ripple was to die tomorrow, XRP will stay alive. So it's like a digital asset which was formed before Ripple as a company was formed, right? Now, this digital asset is already fairly big. It's among the top 3 digital assets in the world. We have closed about 30 million ledgers already using their digital assets, which is based on the distributed ledger technology. Now, what people are able to do is 2 things. One, for example, Vimin has got XRP. You can go to a regulated exchange in Malaysia. Let's assume the exchange is regulated, which is allowed to sell XRP to Vimin. Then you can go, pay ringgit, get XRP, and send Navin XRP. So the transaction will get completed in 3.4 seconds, and then I can convert that XRP into local currency or keep XRP. So that's one part of the solution. Ripple as an institution, we sell XRP from New York. In New York, we have something called as a BIT license, which is regulated, which allows us to sell a digital asset from the state of New York, which is in New York City. We have our offices where we sell them out of. So it's called a BIT license, and it's of course totally regulated.
Okay, if I understood you correctly, so what you have in Thailand, in India, is some sort of remittance license that you hold that allow you to do transfer of funds or remittances, do cross-border remittances.
So we don't need to have a remittance license because we are a software. So what we are doing is we are increasing the transmission, but on both the sides, the sending institution and the receiving institutions are licensed, and they are both regulated body, and they would do the KYC, they would ensure that the rules of the land are adhered to, and what we are the plumbing behind it. So what we are able to do is make that transmission instant and to make sure that the information flow is bidirectional. That means, for example, if the account number is wrong, you put an extra 0 in the account number, even before the debit happens to your account, the beneficiary bank through our system can send the message back to essentially say, hey, the account number is wrong, so that Vimin can immediately know in 5 seconds that there is a mistake in the account number versus realizing that 2 days later when the transaction gets rejected.
So you're purely providing the enabling technology.
That's correct. That's correct. So we are the pipe between the banks.
Yeah. So if that's the case, perhaps if you could elaborate a little bit, what about your BIT license in New York? Why do you need a license if you're only providing the technology? It's something to do with the token itself?
Yeah. So essentially the banks have both the choices. So firstly, they're able to use the underlying platform or the underlying technology with the existing fiat currencies. So for example, ringgit, US dollars, and it increases the velocity of money and irons out all the complications that I talked about, right? But the second thing that we have is this digital asset, which is a choice for an institution to use, right? So they can choose to use it or not use it. So in some cases where it will be regulated in the country, where it will be allowed in the country, then the customer has the option to essentially, for example, not send US dollars. So for example, if you're sending money to Mexico, instead of sending ringgit or US dollar or Mexican peso, what you are able to send is XRP. And if you're able to send XRP, then you convert from ringgit to XRP here at a 24/7 licensed exchange in Malaysia, as you mentioned, that there is a consultation period after that. Some of these exchanges may be licensed, assuming that there was a licensed exchange in Malaysia, then you're able to convert ringgit into XRP, and then it goes to another exchange in Mexico, where it will get converted from XRP into pesos. And the whole transaction happens in few seconds, and hence it is far more efficient versus a traditional channel. And the key thing here is that you have the choice. Then you're able to see what both the systems offer and then choose one versus another depending upon the significant benefit that you see.
Why would, as you said, currently some of the Thailand, India, you guys are operating without using the SRP.
True.
So what's the difference between the two? Why choose one over the other?
Yeah, so the first thing is regulation itself.
Okay.
Right? So we would only enter markets where the rule of the land or the regulatory provision allows us. Right? And as you know, this is an area where regulators are forming opinions, like here in Malaysia, they're thinking about it, and they want to make an informed decision. And once the decision is made, we would respect that decision and work within that framework. So that's really, so the moment, for example, there is enabling regulation in Thailand, maybe there is enabling regulation in India or in Malaysia, then we would follow what that regulation requires us to do.
If I understood you correctly, so your preference would be that if this regulation allows, you will actually prefer the transfer via XRP versus the fiat currency. I mean, you still have the same benefits, right? Yeah. The fiat currency transfer will still similar, cheaper, faster, in the same way you described.
Yeah. So I think the easiest way to describe it would be we would like to bring that choice to the customer. So once the regulation allows, then we want to give Vymin as a user or as a sender of the money, as the owner of that particular remittance, to have the choice, and then for him to choose based on his customer experience to say what suits his needs best, right? So we are, neutral to the choice that Vymin makes, but we want to make that choice. We want to bring that choice to you, and of course, there is great benefits in terms of using XRP, but once Vymin uses it as an individual user. I'm sorry, I'm using your name here to make a point, then you're able to use it and then to see whether it fulfills your requirement, you have the right customer experience, you are able to get a significant benefit versus the traditional method that you would have used.
It sounds like using XRP would have greater benefits. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So what we are seeing in the current markets, and this is, of course, early days. As you know, digital assets, it's a new way of doing things. Yeah. What we have seen in early pilots between US and Mexico, the results have been very, very good, whereby there has been huge improvements in terms of speed, efficiency, cost of the transaction, and hence the initial results look very encouraging. But still, the adoption needs to be far more wider. The liquidity in the market.
Are you saying if I transfer via US dollar in the same route you say US to Mexico is slower or more expensive compared with XRP?
Currently, yes.
I see.
Right. So the traditional channel takes more time, is more expensive, and is error prone.
Both use the same technology enabled.
No. So if you use the both technology, the speed is the same, but in one case it's more peer-to-peer. In one case, generally it is an exchange on one side, which is essentially doing, which is a 24/7 exchange, which is essentially doing the conversion. So, one has its own merits, the other one has its own merits. Also, sometimes you as a new customer who's coming in may or may not be comfortable with the new asset class. So you feel more comfortable with the US dollar, then you can choose US dollar. If you feel comfortable with the digital asset XRP, then you're able to use XRP. So some of it is a little bit in terms of adoption, right? For you to grow comfort with the new digital class that is emerging, right?
Wouldn't you make it transparent? I mean, from an end user perspective, for a Mexican who lives in the US, want to transfer money back to Mexico, all he cares about, can I give you some dollars and make it to peso? Yeah. In between whether you use dollar, peso, or XRP, it should be completely transparent.
True.
Wouldn't that be the case?
That is the case. So that's what I'm saying. So that you could make two choices. One, as an individual, you could hold XRP or choose to do that if you would like, or the institution that you're using. So in some cases, it could be a payment company, it could be a bank, or it could be an exchange house, makes that decision for you, because it essentially says the more efficient way of sending money into Mexico is through XRP, and then they can choose that. Or they say the efficient money is better to do it through US dollar, and then they can choose that. Also, they can make the decision dynamically to say for this one transaction, this makes more sense, and for this Y transaction, this make more sense. So it's again about giving the choice either to the individual to then make the choice to use XRP in the transmission, or the institution that you're using on which you are either on the app or on the online or on the form that you're filling, which makes that choice for you depending upon the efficiency of the mechanism. And we allow both.
Okay. We talk about blockchain technology,
Please.
you know, in today's day and age, you can't run away when we talk about blockchain, we talk about crypto, you know, digital assets, as some people call it. So, you know, we have, you know, great price movements upwards and recently some downwards. Share with us your views. You know, what do you think? Is this all fad? You know, is this something to come and to stay? You know, what is your view from a Ripple perspective? You know, obviously XRP is one of the many digital token, digital assets or cryptocurrency. How do you see this particular industry will, you know, pan out in the next 1, 2, 3 years?
Yeah. So first of all, just to be very direct with your answer, I'm doing exactly the same thing that I was doing 6 months ago, today and for the next 6 months.
Okay.
So we are not distracted by the price, right? We essentially say what we need to do is we need to make sure that technology stays state of art. We are building the ecosystem with banks, with payment companies, with exchange houses, with the regulators to make sure that there is an enabling environment that makes it to succeed. And then we work on our ILP ledger, that is interledger protocol, so that our blockchain is able to speak with other blockchains, because we think in this world there will be multiple blockchains that will become successful in their own verticals or in their own horizontal. And the key thing is that they should be able to speak with each other. It should be an interoperable world versus world being built in silos. So we are totally focused on that.
Okay.
What happens in the markets is primarily demand and supply, right? Which is essentially two individuals trading a particular asset at a particular price, and we really don't participate in that in terms of what's happening. I think what we would ideally like is we would like, of course, some more stability in the market, and the way I would think is these are still early days, and I think as markets goes forward, they'll of course become a lot more stable. That's our expectation, because as we have seen in most of other markets as well, as liquidity increases, as institutional investors comes in, as more products like futures, derivatives are introduced, that creates definitely a lot more stability in the market.
Okay.
But
well,
it's purely demand and supply.
Understood, understood. So for XRP, I guess, you know, in the early days in the Ripple Labs, I guess kept a portion of its tokens for itself. The rest are released to public.
True.
Is that the same view in the future? Would more tokens will be further released out of its own portions, or how do you see that? You know, are you going to coin more tokens out of the original percentages?
So this is already public, so we are not going to publish more tokens.
Okay.
There is only a certain set of tokens that have been created one time, and those are out there. There is a portion of token that Ripple owns, and that is public information as well. Out of that, 55 billion of them are in escrow, which is with a pre-scheduled release every month. And whatever is not used, then it is brought back into the escrow account itself. Okay. Every quarter, we publish XRP report, XRP quarterly report, which essentially talks about what is the price that we have seen, how many tokens we have been able to sell, other things that are happening in the market. So our idea is to, as much as possible, disseminate the information in public space. So Vyman as a user is aware of everything that Ripple is doing. So, and we also take the regulations very seriously, almost at the same height as a stock exchange would, or as a bank would, whereby insider trading, there are rules around it to make sure all the employees, stakeholders, anybody who has any information around it is aware, and then is not doing anything that is not allowed or that is not in the spirit of the regulation. So we essentially abide by every regulation that the land requires us to do.
I guess the final questions is what is the Ripple plans for Asia? You know, any plans to come to Malaysia? What are your grander plan for the next 2-3 years, I guess?
So firstly, we are very excited about Asia, right?
Okay.
And the reason we have to be excited is because one side is the demand side economies. So for example, consuming economies, you can call it the US, the Eurozone. And the other side is the supply side. And the supply side could be in terms of immigration. So a lot of Malaysians, Indians, Chinese who are working overseas, who send money back to their families. So that's a great market for us because there is a huge outflow from these countries, and which counter as inflows into the Asian countries. The same thing is true about products as well, right? So Asia is the factory to the world, and then hence it gets huge amount of remittance flows that essentially comes into these particular countries. So we can have a significant impact on the economies, on the GDP, one by increasing the velocity of money, bringing money quicker, and then second by reducing friction. So Asia is a natural great place for us to work with the governments, to work with the regulators, to decrease the friction and then bring the benefits to the economies. Because if you think about the number that is involved in terms of both the value and the percentage, it is too significant to be ignored. And I think we want to closely work with the Asian economies to make it more transparent, make it more efficient for this money to be brought and then for it to have the multiplier effect on the economies. So we are very gung-ho in Asia. We already have offices in Tokyo, Sydney, Singapore, Mumbai, and it's primarily to serve Asian banks, Asian customers, and making sure that Ripple is on the ground and is able to support them in any need that they would have. Looking at Malaysia, as you just informed me before the talk, Malaysia is already in the consultation period to essentially come up with the regulation. So once the regulation comes, then we would closely abide by those regulations and work under the framework that's provided. But even before that, if there is any way we are able to help provide our combined knowledge from other regulators, other countries, other banks, payment companies that we have seen, we would like to bring that knowledge to SC and to the regulators in Malaysia, so that then when they make a decision, then they have one more informed point of view that they could take that into consideration. So again, very excited about Malaysia, looking forward to the enabling regulations. And outside of that, in our fiat currency model, or in our fiat model, we are talking to large banks here in Malaysia to see how we can bring the benefits that we have brought to India, that we have brought to other countries, to Malaysia as well.
Okay, greatly appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
On behalf of Securities Commission Malaysia, I thank you for your time, and it has been great, and thank you for sharing your experiences with us.
I mean, it's always a pleasure to come back to Malaysia, and I look forward to being here again and closely working with you.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.